Secret Service religious sectarian organization that controls the world. Article by Berk Gümüs.
From the contact reports, we know that the world is controlled by a secret service religious sectarian organization that consists of the CIA/shadow government and large sectarian organizations. Despite the many articles on this subject such as the military-industrial complex, Part 1, Part 2 and the Giza/Bafath intelligences, Part 1, Part 2, I am still often asked who these people or this organization is. So here is to be reported in more detail about this topic. Their repertoire ranges from drug trafficking to overthrowing government. An all-powerful group, which knows no national boundaries, is above the law of all countries, and controls all aspects of politics, religion, commerce, and industry, banking and insurance, meaning the oil industry, drug trade and so on, a group accountable to no one but its own members. History doesn't just happen, it is manufactured by people who have operated behind the scenes of power and media stages for centuries, deliberately pulling their strings largely unknown in the dark. People who brought about bloody revolutions, the French Revolution, the Bolshevik Russian Revolution, and the American Civil War. People who became super rich with drug slave trafficking. People who have long controlled banks and media, big business, associations, unions, research institutes, public opinion, and so on.
512th Contact Saturday, 1st January 2011, 3:13 p.m.
Then I can talk openly. Thus Stephen Penich explained again that on the earth, a religious sectarian organization works together with a certain secret service to manipulate the humans via the television, computers, and the internet as they wish. Not only are television equipment and many monitors manipulated so that the organization can see directly into the room and observe and listen to everything, where the respective device is located, but the computers are also manipulated at will. This alone in relation to computers means that they can be controlled and affected from outside if the organization involved desires to do so. This has been the case for many years, whereby you also have been affected by it with your computer, which was penetrated in order to disturb your work, such that with certain writings, articles and books that deal with religious and sectarian delusion, serious mistakes have been inserted or important facts deleted. Even pure computer disturbances are practiced with you, whereby even faults can occur. The whole thing, however, goes even further, because the mentioned secret service religious sectarian organization also intervenes in the lives of all users of televisions, monitors, and internet users and manipulates them. This organization, which is protected in a secret service manner using all the rules of the art, has achieved worldwide admittance by means of its countless number of manipulated devices into the consciousness of the people, and steers their behavior in many areas.
705th Contact Wednesday, 14th March 2018, 9:58 p.m.
This organization has a worldwide effect, as the electromagnetic waves or very powerful oscillations detected by Ganara and Stephen Penich prove, which also carry sequences that are detrimental to peace and promote hatred, which affect human beings around the earth and influence them maliciously, as well as fundamentally degrading all efforts for peace and making it impossible. In addition, through these swinging waves in the software and internet environment, manipulations are being carried out with regard to the hardware, which are insidiously aimed at influencing and aligning all peoples in such a suggestive way through the television, radio, computer, and internet systems, that they become willfully obedient to the machinations of the upper elites. In this way, the powerful elites of politics, religions, sects and the weapons industry, economy, banks, secret services and all organizations acting in the same way, and so on, can continue to prevent peace, equality, and the freedom of all human beings in the individual as well as in the whole world. And this is being done in such a way that hatred is being driven up among all peoples, be it through religions, sects, politics and all other machinations of any elements that sow hatred and nip in the bud every effort to bring about peace and the bearing and exercising of self-responsibility, as well as destroying every semblance of justice and freedom.
The shadow government.
It is always the same. You go back in history, the Roman Empire, the Soviet Union, Hitler. During the Nazi rule, it was always said that the utopia should be created for the average man, but history has always shown that exactly the opposite happens. Conquests and empires are as old as civilization itself. The legendary Atlantis, Babylonia, Egypt and Greece, they all created empires in an attempt to rule the world. The Roman system dominated the entire known world at its height. Complex systems of government were developed to control diverse populations. In the period from the 15th to the 19th centuries, new empires emerged and waged wars for supremacy. The nobility and the prosperous merchant class were financed by a handful of private banks. Many of the big money houses hedged their bets and financed both sides of a war. Sophisticated intelligence networks gave the financiers a distinct advantage over the governments over which they were slowly gaining control. On September 17, 1787, the Constitution of the United States of America was adopted. The Constitution, based on the principles of separation of powers and checks and balances, was one of the first democratic constitutions in the world. But in the end it was just another lie and a document that gave you away to a corporate state. At the same time, it was also a pretext for the creation of the shadow government. Not too long later, the same people started the French Revolution on May 5, 1789. When the French Revolution was over on November 9, 1799, Napoleon became the autocrat of France. The shadow government continued to finance Napoleon and at the same time England. In 1815, at the Battle of Waterloo, in which the French Emperor was defeated by the combined forces of the British Duke of Wellington and the Prussian General Blücher, Napoleon's fate was sealed. Napoleon's reign was finally ended. After that they financed the American Civil War, the Bolshevik Revolution, and so on, and today, after such a long time, the same people are financing the United States of America's war in Ukraine.
811th contact Wednesday, 22nd June 2022, 10:49 AM.
This eventually led to everything slowly getting out of hand as America, with the senile President Biden at the helm and in the background, of course, the dark government created in 1787 secretly directing him, dragged everything out longer and longer, until Putin lost patience and went to war with Ukraine.
On June 18, 1815, agents of the British branch of the Rothschild family watched as Emperor Napoleon Bonaparte fought desperately to save his army from a British-Prussian pincer attack. A Rothschild agent was able to break the news of Napoleon's defeat through Lord Wellington to Nathan Rothschild 20 hours before the news reached London. Nathan, the head of the British branch of the Rothschild family, spread the rumor on the London Stock Exchange that Napoleon had won the war. Stocks fell 98% and Rothschild was able to buy up the entire British economy for pocket change. When news of Napoleon's defeat finally arrived, stocks soared. Britain was now the undisputed ruler of Europe and Rothschild ruled England. The already dominant British Empire became even more offensive. British troops and bureaucrats spread worldwide. The gang cartel has financed both sides of almost every war since about 1800, and it naturally receives the interest on the loans it has given to the various governments involved in the wars and whose creation was facilitated by the bankers' assistance. Around the year 1900, Germany was a rising power and the leader of the Industrial Revolution. There was absolutely no reason to start World War I except that it was an ideal opportunity for the banking cartel to make a lot of money by financing both sides of the war. On June 28, 1914, the heir to the throne of Austria-Hungary, Archduke Franz Ferdinand, was assassinated while traveling in a motorcade. The Black Hand, a Serbian secret society with connections to the French and British secret services, confessed to the crime, and the First World War had begun. Armament companies financed by Rothschild controlled banks in Germany, France, England and Austria and supplied all participants in the war. At least 20 million people were killed in the war. It was such a terrible conflict that people swore never to fight again. It was called the war that would end all wars. The question is, why did they want war? First, for money and power, and secondly, they wanted to create the League of Nations, which was planned from the beginning, and as soon as the war ended they started to create the idea of a League of Nations so that supposedly it could never happen again. Years of practice made the British experts in heading their empire behind puppet governments. Ostensibly to prevent all future conflicts, they proposed that all countries join a League of Nations. Their true intention was that the League would serve as a framework for world government. President Woodrow Wilson, who led the creation of the private Federal Reserve System in the United States in 1913, strongly supported the formation of the League of Nations. Woodrow Wilson was a very naive president. He was basically a university professor who was recruited for this whole system. The League met in Paris in 1919, but many nations recognized it as a threat to their sovereignty and refused to join. Frustrated by the congressional blockade of the League of Nations, British intelligence agencies, with the help of the Rockefeller family, created the Council on Foreign Relations in New York in 1921. The council recruited America's best and brightest to support the growth of the Anglo-American Empire. The CFR Council on Foreign Relations openly declared that its mission was to abolish all nation-states in favor of an all-powerful world government under the control of a numerically tiny elite. By 1930, the promoters of world government had split into two interlocking camps. The Fabian socialists were centered in London, the fascists in Italy and Germany. Supporters of fascism in the United States and England believed that the military should be used to transform the world into a new world government as quickly as possible. The progressive advocates of globalism, on the other hand, proclaimed that a step-by-step approach was the sure path to global dominance. The Congressional Medal of Honor winner Major General Smedley Darlington Butler addressed the public in 1934 to expose the robber barons' attempt to launch a military coup in the United States. Major General Medley testified before the McCormick-Dickstein Committee that some of the most powerful men in America had tried to recruit him to lead a military coup so that they could institute National Socialism in the United States. He said the following: I appeared before the Congressional Committee of the highest representation Parliament of the American people pursuant to a subpoena, to tell what I knew of activities which I believe might lead to an attempt to set up a fascist dictatorship. I was supposed to lead an organization of 500,000 men which would be able to take over the functions of government. The fascists had also gained a strong foothold in England. Edward VIII, King of England, was forced to give up the throne because of his public support of Adolf Hitler. Despite the strength of the German fascist camp, the Fabian socialist bloc was able to maintain control over the United States, Russia and England. In the startup phase of the Second World War and during the conflict, the bankers again financed both sides just like they had done with Napoleon. After the rise and fall of the Third Reich, Europe lay in ruins. Again, the elite claimed that only a world government could save humanity from certain annihilation. And this time, the elite successfully installed their global system. In April 1945, the United Nations was founded at the Presidio Naval Base in San Francisco by the victorious powers of World War I. The UN complex was then built in New York City on land donated by John D. Rockefeller. Shortly after, the global elite created the United Nations as their base of operations in the United States. The newly formed World Council soon began working on the next phase of the plan: the gradual formation of continental superstates. The first step in their master plan was the creation of the European Union. The unification of Europe had been attempted many times and was extremely difficult and unpopular. While Napoleon and Hitler failed in their attempt to achieve their goal by force, the globalists succeeded with a covert approach. The British led the creation of the European Council on May 5, 1949. It was claimed that the London Treaty only established trade relations between European countries comparable to NEFTA or GETT in North America. The real intention was the formation of a European superstate.
213th Contact, Tuesday, 2nd December 1986, 3:17 am.
What is actually with the Beast 666, which functions in a form of prophecy as an evil dictatorship which should come from Belgium?
With this old customary prophesied beast which will bear the number of evil and negativity, it concerns in the coming time the so-called European Union, in short called the EU, which will be a European-wide dictatorship that will be decided on and established with a treaty on the 1st of November 1993 with a so-called Maastricht Treaty. Then, along with this, there will be created a political and economic union of the member states of the advancing European Economic Community, the EC, respectively the European Community, the EC, whose objectives will be the promotion of social and economic progress with no internal boundaries existing anymore, and the creation of an economic and monetary union. In addition, what will eventually be strived for later is a common foreign affairs policy and a common security policy of the member states, as well as a common defense policy. It will also be planned for the citizens of the member states to create the European Union citizenship. Also the areas of the military and the judiciary, as well as road transport and agriculture, as well as the industrial economy, should ultimately be determined by the powerful figures of the EU, which will have its residence of power in Brussels, Belgium.
The shadow government today consists mainly of the CIA, NSA and so on, and their countless international organizations like the EU, FTO, UN and so on, and their equally countless front companies also called military-industrial complex like Lockheed Martin, Raytheon Technologies, Boeing, Northrop Grumman, General Dynamics, General Motors, ORD, US Steel, General Electric, Oracle Corporation, Microsoft, MITR Corporation, EMGN, Lilly, Apple, Google and so on. This also includes all Western media platforms, and other Western organizations, such as think tanks, and so on, as well as all Western intelligence agencies. The approach to the Eastland patents and the HERP project provide information about how the shadow government, respectively the Secret Service, Religious Sectarian Organization SSRSO, proceeds so that such experiments can be carried out. Dr. Bernhard Eastland is a physicist with degrees from MIT and Columbia University who worked for the Atomic Energy Commission for 8 years on fusion programs. In the early 1980s, Dr. Eastland had some ideas based on Nikola Tesla technologies that could be used for SDI purposes. The owner of the Eastland patents is a company called ARCO Power Technologies Inc. Pti. Investigations revealed that EPTI is a subsidiary of Atlantic Richfield Oil Company ARCO. EPTI has a president in Los Angeles and approximately 25 employees in Washington, D.C. with an annual budget of approximately $5 million. Further research revealed that ARCO has large oil deposits in northern Alaska. Developing these oil wells and transporting the oil to other states in the United States is too costly. Therefore it is particularly favorable for ARCO, if it can use its oil deposits locally, and for example the HERP ionosphere heater to operate. In the 90s EPTI was bought by the company Systems, which has many military contracts. Many of this company's contracts come from the NSA and CIA. The employees are under a need-to-know authority and have an official annual budget of about $2 billion. This company developed eavesdropping devices and the satellite-based GPS system. In 1995, Raytheon purchased the systems for about $2.3 billion, giving it the HERP contract and the EPTI/Eastland patent. Raytheon's budget that year was $20 billion and employed about 600,000 people. Thus, within a few years, HERP was owned by one of the largest defense contractors in the world. Raytheon merged in 1997 with Hughes Aircraft, which was named after its founder, Howard Hughes, and merged into Raytheon Technologies in 2020. In 2020, Raytheon Technologies made a turnover of $97.7 billion. Raytheon is not only the company that invented the microwave oven, but is also a pioneer in the development of microwave weapons.
Further examples of the shadow government/SSO's approach.
The Nazis gave people numbers to categorize and track them when they put them in their concentration camps. The Secret Service Religious Sectarian Organization SSRSO, instead of building camps and giving people numbers, has created a whole matrix of biological data from the genome that genetically categorize each person down to retinal scans, facial biometrics, fingerprints, blood type, bonds, DNA, and so on, and so on, and so on. Icelandic geneticist Dr. Kari Stefansson founded his company Decoder Genetics in 1996 with the aim of creating a worldwide unique genetic superdatabase containing everything that can be learned about his nation from a biomedical point of view. Among them are the genes, medical records and pedigrees of all 270,000 Icelanders. Critics of decoder genetics believe that Iceland will become the world's first genetic surveillance state and that other countries will follow in time. In February 1998, he sold all his patient data to the pharmaceutical giant Hoffmann La Roche, now called Roche Holding EG. In December 1998, the Icelandic Parliament Althing decided on the comprehensive collection and storage of all health data of the population by this company. The legal basis in Iceland is the Act on Biobanks. In 2003, the Supreme Court ruled that this law was not constitutional because it subsequently violated the privacy of deceased persons, and that the encryption of the data was insufficient. In November 2009, the company announced it had filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in the United States and sold its core business to United States investors. In December 2012, Decode Genetics was acquired for $415 million by United States biotechnology giant Amgen, which had 2020 sales of $25.5 billion. The Human Genome Diversity (HGD) project collected thousands of human tissue samples from isolated peoples, ethnic groups, and indigenous peoples worldwide. The tissue samples collected were made available to academic research institutions, biotechnology corporations and even biomedical laboratories at the Fort Derrick Bioweapons Facility near Washington, D.C. Fort Derrick is home to a unit of the Defense Intelligence Agency (DIA), which, among other things, studies and analyzes medical data from foreign countries. These links to bioweapons research were discovered in 1996 by the Rural Advancement Foundation International (RFI), a group critical of biotechnology. People whose tissues are searched for rare genetic material or genetic mutations are often not informed of the purposes for which their genetic samples are used. It is very difficult to obtain information about cell lines from the National Institute of Health in IH because they are considered trade secrets. RFI also found that the United States Navy has taken tissue samples from individuals on the Indonesian side of Papua New Guinea, the Philippines and Peru. In April 1996, Nobel laureate Dr. Carleton Gajdusek was imprisoned in the United States for child abuse. He brought more than 50 children from Papua New Guinea and Micronesia to the United States over the years. Dr. Gajdusek had an NIH office at the Fort Derrick Bioweapons Research Center. When the Iran-Contra affair was exposed in the mid-1980s, Lieutenant Colonel Delcy Duncan ran into trouble from government investigators. His superiors in the Department of Defense wanted him to justify several million United States dollars from the black budget. The black budget is the treasury of the military and intelligence agencies and funds projects that are kept from the public, Congress, government officials and even the president. But Colonel Duncan was a member of a secret army within the United States Army. He spent a lot of money on covert operations in South America and other parts of the world. He used front companies and secret bank accounts for his financial transactions and money laundering. The United States Congress appropriated $90 million for the Special Operations Division (SOD) in 1981. Of that amount, about $20 million went into the black budget. With this $20 million, a secret unit called the Intelligence Support Activity (ISA) was created. The mission of this unit was to gather intelligence for the secret armies worldwide. The ISA was the intelligence arm of this division operating in secrecy from Congress. But Col Duncan ran a company in Anandole called Business Security International Inc. In 1982, in reality, this was a front company from which covert operations were run under the code name Yellow Fruit. These operations were so secret that neither the highest levels of the Army nor Congress knew anything about them. Over time, the SOD became more than a secret squadron. The SOD became a cell-like organization in the state because of its funding methods, such as for Operation Yellow Fruit. These paramilitary units carried out their missions for the CIA and NSA in a variety of hotspots. As a result of the Iran-Contra investigation, it came to light that this division had created several black programs that the military's top commanders were unaware of. The Special Access Program Oversight Committee eventually discovered that the secret soldiers were running between 50 and 60 black programs. It took nearly 4 years to trace the money flows and transactions. Much of the evidence was destroyed, even though the destruction of government documents is prohibited by law. Many of the contents of these programs remained hidden from the investigation team. Some of the individuals involved, such as Dale Duncan, were convicted in court. Most of the people involved in the scandal could not be proven to have done anything concrete, although the investigation reached the directorate of the NSA. The NSA, also known as Never Say Anything or No Such Agency, is steeped to culture of secrecy. Its employees must go to surgeons and dentists recommended by the agency for treatment, just in case they talk under anesthesia. They are encouraged to marry in-house and to have as little contact to the outside world as possible. The NSA does not report in any official way to any other corporations. It reports only into the Central Intelligence Agency, which receives information for the whole US government. Where that information is commercial, it goes to the Department of Commerce, where there is a special CIA section that receives it. That information can be used to guide an American business on how to best win the contract. The information would be so filtered the company wouldn't even know that it was from the NSA. The NSA is the National Security Agency of the United States of America. It is the world's largest wiretapping organization and is capable of globally intercepting telephone conversations and other communication methods via satellite and other high-tech methods.
The three main tasks of the NSA are
Communications Intelligence Command, the complete monitoring and interception of electronic communications for specific word combinations or keywords, computer, phone, smartphone, email, and so on, transferred to the United States, and the interception of any person or organization for national security reasons. The NSA owns since the early 60s the most powerful computers in the world that were developed in secret. Signals Intelligence Unit. The task of SINIT is to develop programs that allow wireless hacking into computer or any electronic systems by decoding electromagnetic waves. The NSA has the capability to register the biomagnetic fields of an individual person and exploit them for surveillance purposes. Telepresence technology, developed at NASA's Ames laboratory at Moffett Field in California, allows operators to create a virtual illusion so that they believe they are on a street with the person being monitored in their home or their vehicle. With this technology, it is possible to harass the monitored person, as it is possible to send him messages regarding his surroundings. The illusion is created that the operator can look through the eyes of the monitored person, just like in the 2006 US action thriller Deja Vu, which in the movie shows a similar technology to the telepresence technology. The telepresence surveillance system was installed in New York City in 1986 and justified by the celebrations held to commemorate the renovation of the Liberty Building. In 1988, such a system was installed for the inauguration ceremony of George Herbert Bush. In 1989, this system was installed in Philadelphia to monitor the celebrations of the 200th anniversary of the Constitution. Since 1989, this surveillance system has been installed throughout the country and financed with anti-drug funds. 3. Domestic intelligence domain. The NSA has amassed data on all American and possibly the majority of the Earth's population. But the CIA and NSA are in turn controlled by the R&D Corporation / the real shadow government, the so-called intellectual parents of the CIA.
Except from the article Military-Industrial Complex Part 1.
The R&D Corporation is the most important and influential think tank in the history of the world. About 30 Nobel Prize winners have worked for this organization, who won their Nobel Prize while working for R&D. Originally, the R&D Corporation was an offshoot of the Air Force, which wanted to recreate the Manhattan Project. The Manhattan Project was a combination of civilian scientists and the military. Washington and the country's industry, General Motors, U.S. Steel, General Electric, recruited the so-called brightest minds from around the country for the Manhattan Project in 1942. From MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, Princeton and Columbia University, who gave the world the radar, the fighter jet and the atomic bomb. General Henry Hawley Hap Arnold, a 5-star general in the Air Force, wanted to make sure after World War I that the same combination of civilian scientists and military know-how came together to develop new weapons. On March 1, 1946, Project R&D was launched, at the time still based at Douglas Aircraft Company, then the nation's largest aircraft manufacturer. But within 2 years, in 1948, Project R&D grew so large that it had to break away from Douglas Aircraft Company to become its own non-profit organization. Yet it was inextricably linked to the FORD Foundation, the robber barons like Carnegie, FORD, Rockefeller and Rothschild. There was always a connection between think tanks and the big business interests. Especially in the case of R&D, there was an inseparable connection to the FORD Foundation. For the lawyer who drafted the charter for R&D later became the first president of the FORD Foundation. Without Ford's funding, the R&D Corporation would never have gotten off the ground. The close relationship between FORD and R&D was the great economic interest in protecting their own interests and selling their goods worldwide. FORD wanted to make sure they would have consumers. The R&D Corporation served as a very useful complement to this capitalist outlook. One of Rand's first projects in 1946 was the development of orbiting satellite stations, which until then had only been seen in science fiction comics. But the scientists at R&D made this a reality, so much so that they even said what jet fuel should be used, what the weight-lift-off ratio, and as for that satellite should be. The R&D Corporation was also very instrumental in the development of ballistic intercontinental missiles, the development of the hydrogen bomb, and the deployment, storage and transportation of nuclear weapons. In the late 1950s, they sought a way to maintain communications in the event of a nuclear attack. A R&D computer scientist named Paul Barron developed the concept of packet switching, which became the foundation of the Internet. They were involved in the development of aircraft capable of refueling United States bombers in the air with another aircraft that would take off from the United States to bomb various targets in the Soviet Union. R&D was also responsible for the CIS subversion policy, holding the first counterinsurgency conference for Third World countries in the 1950s. They incited the military to stage overthrows, which were then also organized a short time later, for example in Peru, Brazil and Chile, which continue to this day.
717th Contact Wednesday, 6th October 2021, 9:32 p.m.
This happened because the WHO have their people, even in the state leaders, direct everything secretly.
So they really do rule and direct, consequently the rulers who are at the helm such as...
That is correct. There are also people who work as advisors, whose advice is then implemented by the advised state leaders, and the acquired wisdom of what they have been taught and advice by the advisors is dictatorially passed on to the population. These then usually follow everything without objection, and have no idea that they are not being directed by the powerful people officially at the helm, but by advisors who in reality pursue completely different goals and are in turn dependent on those on whose behalf they work as advisors.
In that they then really govern precisely as a shadow government, but no one wants to admit that.
Secret Israeli Christian Command 66th Contact Wednesday, 10th November 1976, 2:18 p.m.
But now Liston Father has clarified the concerns about the mysterious events of the last months, because among other things they tried to kill you 3 times. The attacks themselves lead back to 2 different groups with completely different interests. The first attack was carried out by elements of a secret Israeli Christian religious command. Israeli Christian means that these are Christian forces in the Israeli state. The reason for this lies in the spread of the Talmud Emmanuel, whose first finder and translator, Ezra Rashid, was found and killed by the same elements in Baghdad in March of this year. There is still a danger for you that this command will track you down in secret and try to carry out its will. So be very attentive and extremely careful. They have already once destroyed the truth, if it took thousands of years, before it can now be brought anywhere. The worldly greed for might of the sects and religions is boundless, which is why every means will do for them to realize it. But you represent a danger to them, for your spreading of truth in general, and especially about them, especially through the Talmud, very much endangers their belief and domineering plans. Beware, therefore, of the secretly burrowing religious ones. This secret Christian command in Israel could be an organization such as the Zionist B'nai B'rith.
Wikipedia B'nai B'rith Hebrew. German-Sohn des Bundes, also called B'nai B'rith, were in German-speaking countries until the Nazi-era Unabhängiger Orden von Breslau. Ubor B'nai B'rith is a Jewish organization. It was founded in New York in 1843 as a secret lodge by 12 Jewish immigrants from Germany and, according to its self-description, is dedicated to the promotion of tolerance, humanity and welfare. Another goal of B'nai B'rith is education about Judaism and education within Judaism. Currently, there are about 500,000 organized members in about 60 states. This makes it one of the largest Jewish international associations. The publication organ is the B'nai B'rith International Jewish Monthly. The headquarters is in Washington, D.C. There the organization also operates a museum on Jewish history, B'nai B'rith Klutnik National Jewish Museum. An honorary member of B'nai B'rith is also the former Chancellor of Germany, Angela Merkel. The organization B'nai B'rith honored Chancellor Angela Merkel for her humanitarian services, among other things for the defense of human rights in the world, even in 2008 with a gold medal for the destruction of the nation-states of Europe strictly according to the Zionist program. In addition, it also triggered later by order of the shadow government in 2015/2016 the artificially created refugee crisis in Europe.
616th contact Thursday, 12th March 2015, 1:54 p.m. The Merkel regime Zionist WITH pass destroys Germany 2008 to 2014. The Zionist Jewish woman Angela Merkel gave Germany away as Chancellor with a Jewish passport from 2008 to 2014. She is an agent. Film protocol by Mikhail Palomino 2014.
The Zionist Jew Angela Merkel gave Germany away from 2008 to 2014. She is destroying Germany. Zionist Merkel has an Israeli passport and gave Germany away from 2008 to 2014, strictly according to the Zionist program to destroy the nation-states of Europe. To this end, the euro was created to make dependencies so bad that populations would accept a Brussels dictatorship and destroy themselves as a national identity. This is the meaning of the euro, described in Udo Alfcott's book Bought Journalists in Chapter 5. Ms. Merkel is willing to participate in this destruction of the nation of Germany. Until 2012, it was hardly known that Ms. Merkel not only gave Germany away to Brussels, but that she even possessed a Jewish passport and was hanging out with the high Zionists in Jerusalem. This is shown in the following video. To be Jewish is normal, but to be a Zionist and to hang out with the high Zionists in Jerusalem and to pursue a Zionist policy in Germany against Germans is really going too far. Ms. Merkel goes so far as to reject the German flag. You cannot do that. I am sure she'd be better off as head of government in Jerusalem. The following video shows the attitude of Chancellor Merkel. She is demonstrably Jewish, but unfortunately also a Zionist with a Zionist order of the secret lodge B'nai B'rith. And Ms. Merkel demonstrably does not stand up for Germany, as has already been proven by the 2014 sanctions against Russia, which caused a 25% slump in industry. And Ms. Merkel is pursuing anti-Russian policies, putting peace with Russia at risk and letting Obama dictate how she should act. This, too, can no longer be accepted by the German population. It needs a change.
720th contact Saturday, 11th May 2019, 10:07 p.m.
And this because the United States of America are politically striving for something specific that they also want to realize, and namely a thing that is quite clear and disingenuous, since also this and the actions of the United States of America that will still follow undoubtedly pursue a very specific determination which shall ultimately bring Persia and all Arab states fully under the control and might of the United States of America. To this end, the United States of America, and in their sense also the German Chancellor who provided assistance, triggered the mass waves of refugees to Europe. And this solely for the purpose of putting the European states, which all belong to the European Union dictatorship, under pressure and destroying them in their structures in such a way that they shall ultimately join the United States of America in an alliance. Only Switzerland is still excluded from this, but it too is endangered in its freedom by persons who are betraying their homeland and fanatically flirting with the European Union dictatorship and the United States of America. The real reason for the rise of the mass waves of refugees to Europe provoked by the United States of America and Chancellor Merkel is therefore that from the whole in Europe a new regulation is to be created according to American system in order to in this way create a bastion against Russia and China, and namely owing to the anxiety of the United States of America, leaders of the country, regarding the possibility of these two states invading Europe together. And this bastion is to emerge from the fact that precisely because caused by the flows of refugees, all national borders throughout Europe have to be sealed off so rigorously and impermeably that no human being can any longer enter a European country unrecognized. Already for several generations, the United States of America have been secretly and repeatedly planning to erect a bastion against Russia and China in Europe and to force Europe with ever greater sanctions to support the US-American endeavors so that the United States of America will be able to assert their striving for world domination just as all other states are, then also to be brought under compulsory US control through sanctions. And the fact that these determinations have already been planned for a long time, indeed already over several generations, and namely beginning after the end of the last World War, has on the 3rd of October 2007 even been clearly and publicly stated by the American General of the United States of America Army W. who resigned from his service when he in a general sense made the following statement, so that also the plan of the U.S. military strategist Thomas M. Barnett succeeds in the sense that the mass migration to Europe demanded by him and militarily arranged for the change of the population's ethnic composition of the European nations can be carried out in order to let the New World Order become reality.
Except from the article Military-Industrial Complex Part 1.
Paul Wolfowitz and Albert Wohlstetter were of Jewish descent, as were countless other influential R&D strategists who fiercely advocate Israel's interests with a strong interest in the Middle East, America's messianic role in the world, and Zionism, which sees Israel's survival as necessary as humanity's survival, were beliefs encouraged by Albert Wohlstetter. The Middle East, with its vast oil reserves, became the focus of a well-coordinated plan to further expand America's power and to reshape the anti-Semitic countries. These plans were exactly what Albert Wohlstetter, Paul Wolfowitz and other R&D strategists had in mind and in their pro-Israel mentality.
Scientology.
The American sect mentioned above in the 779 contact report is the Scientology sect, which is also a part of the shadow government and thus also a part of the Secret Service religious sectarian organization. 717th Contact Witness Day, 6 October 2021, 9:32 p.m.
This happened because the who have their people even in the state leaders direct everything secretly.
So they really do rule and direct, consequently the rulers who are at the helm such as...
That is correct. There are also people who work as advisors, whose advice is then implemented by the advised state leaders, and the acquired wisdom of what they have been taught and advice by the advisors is dictatorially passed on to the population. These then usually follow everything without objection, and have no idea that they are not being directed by the powerful people officially at the helm, but by advisors who in reality pursue completely different goals and are in turn dependent on those on whose behalf they work as advisors.
In that they then really govern precisely as a shadow government, but no one wants to admit that.
Yes. And this also includes those people who are from the American sect, which also commits murders that are never solved because every murder is discussed as a suicide and judged as a suicide out of fear of the sect in its favor, or because the police and the judges guild themselves belong to the sect, as is the case especially in this is because the murder victims, on the one hand, know too much and, on the other hand, suddenly represent a danger to the organization. So these people who know too much and suddenly know too much are eliminated.
614th contact Monday, 23rd February 2015, 2:03 p.m.
Look here, this fax was beamed to me by Marion because Willem watched the described film on television. This is a TV film about the OSS Secret Service of Scientology. I recently watched the film on 21 February together with Bernadette on television, which was released on 8 April 2014 but was shown on television on 21 February. It can also be borrowed, bought or viewed on the internet, so be what Marion faxed me. I copied from the internet the following: The Informers of Scientology, the sect Secret Service OSE, ERD Doku Sen determined se. February 21, 2015, 10:30 p.m.
Plot: Scientology is one of the most controversial sects in the world. And yet even world stars like Tom Cruise and John Travolta follow the organization of founder Ron Hubbard. What is far less well known is that Scientology has its own secret service, the Office of Special Affairs OSA, commanded by Scientology leader David Miscavige in Los Angeles. It is the oldest private secret service in the world and larger and more influential than the secret services of many states. But why does a religious community need a secret service? What methods does this mysterious organization use, and with what goal? Who are the people who work for this office?
Informers of Scientology. The sect Secret Service OSE. Film by Marcus Thus and Frank Nordhausen. Published on April 8, 2014. Info original title: The Informers of Scientology. The sect Secret Service OSED, 2012. Director Marcus Thus. Length 89 minutes. Stereo Scientology in Berlin. Sourced /Jens.
Why does a religious community need a secret service? Frank Nordhausen and Marcus Thus pursue this question in their documentary about the most mysterious department of the Scientology organization. They spent more than a year researching with the camera in Europe and the United States of America. Their 90-minute documentary is the world's first detailed film about OSA, the Office of Special Affairs. Scientology is classified as an extremist sect in various European countries, and is therefore monitored by domestic intelligence services. The German Office for the Protection of the Constitution has been observing the organization since the mid-1990s on the grounds of justified suspicion of anti-constitutional efforts, for its aim is the establishment of a totalitarian social order. That's a well-known fact. Hardly known, however, is that Scientology itself maintains a secret service that deals with dissenters and critics. Scientology agents have been proven to have committed espionage, burglary, coercion and other criminal offenses. Their Office of Special Affairs is the oldest and largest private secret service in the world, commanded by Scientology leader David Miscavige in Los Angeles. The sect itself describes OSE as its press and legal office, which procures information about dropouts and critics only legally. Who are the people who work for this office? What are your goals? What methods do they use? The exciting documentation provides answers to these questions. In the course of their research, Frank Nordhausen and Marcus Thus even came across connections to high politics all the way to the State Department in Washington. Scientology is one of the most controversial sects in the world. And yet even world stars like Tom Cruise and John Travolta follow the organization of Scientology founder Ron Hubbard. What is far less well known is that Scientology has its own secret service, the Office of Special Affairs OSA. It is larger and more influential than the secret services of many states. The documentation traces the methods and goals of the secret service of the Pseudosect. How dangerous is OSA? The documentary sheds light on how the secret organization of Scientologists is taking action against critics, politicians, lawyers, the media and dropouts in the United States of America, France, Russia, Greece, and above all in Germany. Scientology dropouts, some of whom also come from the highest levels of the organization, and Scientology experts tell of their phase. They report on their experiences with the Secret Service and describe how the agents of Scientologists operate worldwide. PR actions, acts of sabotage, infiltration of authorities and organizations, harassment of dropouts and slander campaigns against opponents. That's how insiders and victims describe those as instruments. Many feel shedded, threatened and intimidated sometimes for their whole lives. According to the internal instructions of sect founder L. Ron Hubbard, methods such as infiltration, blackmail, counterfeiting, fraud, bribery and coercion are permitted to ensure the survival of Scientology. Scientology, on the other hand, refers to OS as its press and legal office, which only legally obtains information about critics and dropouts. The internal monitoring system is similar to that of the GERS State Security Service, as claimed by former Bavarian Prime Minister Gunther Beckstein, for example. In 2010, the Scientology organization is facing an existential crisis. A number of senior executives have left the cult for many years, including the former head of OSE. What he and other insiders report provides deep insights into the innermost structure and state of Scientology for the first time. High-ranking dropouts openly attack current Scientology boss David Miscavige and accuse him of personally abusing them. Their allegations paint the picture of a perfidious surveillance system. Well, we already dealt with this organization years ago and got the book from Mrs. Hartwig until we were told that it had now been incorporated by the Scientologists and was now talking and working at their mill. However, we could not find out whether this is really true. But now that we have seen the film The Informers of Scientology, the whole thing topples us off again and shows us how this psychosect has evolved maliciously in the meantime, which has nothing else in mind but the establishment of a totalitarian world social order, which is also designed to exploit people both financially and in terms of labor. And when people who belong to the sect do not trace according to Scientology laws, then they are badly punished, not only physically, but also psychologically. There are also testimonies of people who were cult members and turned away and liberated themselves from Scientology, but many of them have been harassed and psychologically harassed by Scientology spies for years, sometimes all their lives. And as the film shows, bribery, fraud, threats, blackmail, forgery and coercion are part of the everyday life of the psychosect, as well as the torture of delinquent cult members, which can probably be described as torture, in which the OSE or sect secret service also plays a major role. All this in addition to the fact that the cult infiltrates the authorities and organizations and so on and has established itself in the United States of America in their highest government as well as in the individual states in their authorities and their governments. The hammer was already in early sectarian time that Hillary Clinton, the wife of President Clinton, was worried that Scientology would not have to pay taxes, while Clinton himself wrote and published articles for the Scientology newspapers, suggesting something about Clinton membership of the Scientology psychic sect.
Since I have been involved with the machinations of this criminal organization since its inception, I can only confirm what you say. The whole of the Scientology sect's endeavor, however, is not based solely on the establishment of a totalitarian world social order, but on the fact that a secret striving for effective world domination is prescribed, which is to encompass absolute control over all governments and authorities as well as armies, secret services and the entire economy. And in order to achieve this sect regards no means as too small, too difficult or severe. Consequently, even the worst capital crimes have to be considered.
Except from Volterne.org, June 15, 2022. The Top Gun Maverick, a clip for enlistment in the United States Armed Forces. Released on May 25, 2022, the movie Top Gun Maverick has already grossed more than $750 million. It is one of the 100 most lucrative films in history. It was designed as a propaganda clip for enlistment in the U.S. Armed Forces. They provided a lot of software, hardware, people and even 2 nuclear-powered aircraft carriers. In return, the producers agreed to have their script rewritten and their cast selected by the Pentagon. Below is the contract between the civilian producers and the Pentagon. Group of 11 within Jehovah's Witnesses in Hinwil.
These 11 group respectively the descendants still exist within the Jehovah's Witnesses sect in Hinwil, which from the beginning were connected with the Giza intelligences, and also with the dark government of the United States of America, as you can read in the following 797 contact report below. So you can say that the descendants of this 11th group, and the shadow government of the United States of America represent a direct connection and continuation of the Giza intelligences, which is not surprising if you look at the current world situation. So also with good conscience it can be asserted that in a way the intellectual parents of the SSRSO organization which directs the events of the world into their arbitrary courses were again the Giza intelligences, as they also were behind almost all the big and bloody empires of the world since the time of Atlantis.
797th contact Saturday, 26th March 2022, 2:27 p.m.
In the main, it is that through their research, they now know that the whole of the lawlessness against you goes back to your childhood, because a woman hated you because you told her your opinion about religion and faith when you were a boy. However, this woman was a fanatically strict believer and belonged to a faith community to which she complained about you. Consequently, some lengthy consultations took place and then attempts were made to win you as a member of this community. The smaller group somehow came into contact with beings that were alien and called themselves Umigos, although it is not yet clear how this was possible. These alien beings were originally also fanatical believers in an all-creating higher might, which they called Saladin and worshipped. In the course of time, however, they fell away from this erroneous belief and turned to Christianity and sought like-minded people far and wide, which they also found in your hometown, among others. But how the connection with the woman came about, who became the actual origin of your lifelong embrace, has not yet been clarified. These Umigos were vicious and fanatically hostile to everything that did not correspond to their views and their faith. Therefore they tried to secretly undermine the faith of all human beings, which was different and strange to them. This was done imperceptibly in such a way that with the help of their devices brought from their homeland, they influenced almost all believers with unnameable exceptions of the earthly religions worldwide through their electronic microtechnology, which was still absolutely unknown on Earth at that time, and its possibilities in such a way that they gradually lost control over their own thinking and became largely incapable of thinking for themselves, and also unstable. Furthermore, they influenced the believers in such a way that they fell prey to malice and bloodlust, whereby they created enmities again and again, which led to evil wars, to religious murder, and all imaginable evil. In the course of time, however, it came to pass that the Umigos, through the influences of the Earth humans' faith in Christianity, became doubtful of their higher might, ultimately repugnant and apostate from it, consequently becoming more and more foreign to their faith, which ultimately led them gradually to turn to the earthly religion of Christianity and to acknowledge the God of that creed. Something that also happens today with earth humans who are lulled by religious platitudes or who very quickly change their faith through coercion or benefit and become believers in another religion. With the Umigos, however, it was a lengthy process that took a long time. But when Christianity began to spread, they finally turned to it and stuck to it. How the Umigos came into contact with the woman and this religious community in your hometown has not yet been investigated by Arlian and his followers, to which he also said that this was not really important, because the only thing that was important was what resulted from it, and that was what haunted you throughout your life. The said woman was a strict believer, but as vicious as the Umigos themselves, who said,
Like goes with like, as we say.
That is aptly said, yet I have never heard those words until now. Good, just now I was talking about this woman being a strict believer regarding the Christian faith, yet she was as vicious in her disposition as the Umigos who had set up their headquarters deep under the main pyramid at Giza in Egypt.
Something dawns on me, namely the Gizahanis, who were then caught and deported by the Pleiadians. Am I right?
Yes, they were, a splintered group of a criminal tribe of our Federation that found passage into this universe and likewise to Earth, because they had our through.
Because they must have been secretly following the Pleiadians when they came to Earth to join us. Bermuda, that's about the way it was, isn't it?
Yes, that is how it was, as I have been oriented in that regard. But now hear further what Arlian explained. There were, besides the spiteful and wicked woman.
Horat was her name, but I do not know exactly how her name is spelled correctly, just whether this name has an additional H or not. I also want to mention that the majority of all believers are probably deeply unbalanced in their character and in such a way that all evil immediately breaks through to the outside, and these human beings quickly become active in the respective form up to and including hatred and killing and so on.
The extras is not important. But what you say regarding the evil deep in the character, that is undeniable. Now, Arlian related that there were 11 other persons, men and women, with this numerous faith community who revealed a nature that was strictly devout. But like the woman, they were also evil, but maintained good relations with some of the local government, specifically 2 men named and who had intimate relations with the woman, although all 3 were married. This woman also had an intimate relationship with your teacher, with whom you spent 1 year in year 4. Who often beat you mercilessly in front of all the students and...
I remember that, and furthermore, I once saw him and the woman you are talking about on the so-called Volubas when they...
That will not have pleased them both, but let me report further. Arlian explained that the woman and the other 11 persons hated you and wished you to die, which of course did not come to pass, so it was arranged that very evil was done to you and that you were shouted down. Intrigues were devised and carried out against you with the help of the community officials and the police, with teachers also helping, but they honestly supported you, but they were forced
to howl with the wolves, otherwise they would have been out of a job, like Teacher Lehman. I know because he told me himself.
Yes, that's how it was, but I do not have to tell you about that, because you know yourself what happened and how you coped with everything. But Arlian said that in the whole affair the Umagas were very much involved, so in their wickedness and Christian fanaticism they did much to harm you how and where they could. They succeeded very well with the help of the influenced members of the local government, but your will to resist was stronger than their intrigues and all the malice that was shown to you. Besides, I must also mention, the Umagas used 2 of their 5 devices, which they possessed and handed over to the woman to maliciously influence many human beings in your hometown. These devices, powered by electrical energy, produced an electronic microvibration that could be widely broadcast and adjusted to certain human beings. One of the devices was given in 1948 by a man of the 11 group, namely, to an American friend whom he did not know belonged to the dark government of America. Since then, the latter have been using the virtually indestructible device to this day to influence or even kill certain persons according to their will and benefit. The Umagas brought these devices with them from their homeland, and they are constructed of metal unknown on Earth, which the experts of the dark government have not yet been able to analyze. The devices can be used in many ways. For example, to induce hallucinations in human beings that seem so real that the people concerned firmly believe that what has happened to them is real. This happened, for example, with Simiase and other persons in your workroom, as Arlian explained. They also have many other efficacies, one of which is how they are used to attack your electronic devices and negatively affect your work and damage everything when you work with them. The emanations of the electronic microwaves also work in other ways, such as how you described to me the strange occurrence that happened in the kitchen of the center. But in another way, the second device was used by the group in your hometown to influence various persons in such a way that they did everything that was harmful to you, which ultimately led to you being taken everywhere and harassed. You, however, did not let yourself be influenced and always remained yourself, as you had learned from Bafath to defend yourself against foreign swinging waves of various kinds and to simply neutralize them. This is the reason why you were never affected by malicious swinging waves, and consequently all attacks of any kind against you were ineffective. However, it is different with regard to the electronic devices and other materials that you have to handle for your work, for these naturally react to the negative influences that are directed towards them. Consequently, they no longer work correctly for you when you work with them, while other persons can use the same devices without any problems. How it works in this way is because all the swinging waves are aligned with your personality, but are deflected by your defenses and transferred to the equipment or material you are working with.
Aha, that finally explains to me why suddenly even wrong letters and strokes and so on occur when writing with a biro and so on, which is why for a long time Eva has had to write me everything that has to be handwritten.
That is unquestionably due to these swinging waves. But towards what Arlen explained to me is that the transmission of the whole thing expanded more and more to such an extent that later you were under constant control even in other countries, because a whole network was created that constantly controlled you wherever you were. It was not enough, however, because it was taken so far that your life was to be ended, but the persons hired for this purpose did not succeed. Now, Arlen further explained that the woman and 8 of those persons died in the following 34 years, but their 9 descendants were so influenced by their parents that they became equally fanatically religious, believing and hostile to you that they obsessively sought to harm you in the most diverse ways. And so it came about that many attempts were made to end your life. Consequently, the attacks in this regard increased, but you only reported them to the police about 3 times. Because there were also third persons who urged you to report them. To my knowledge, it was the first time in Mehrauli in India because the President of India was standing by when you were shot and injured.
Yes, it was Dr. Radhakrishnan and Dr. Sharma, but there were also 2 women there, and that was Mrs. Fisk and Miss Rogers. In Switzerland it was in Hinwil, and before Saarland when I was shot at. In Hinwil it was on the 1st floor where I was printing writings in the presence of Rosa Gottschalk, who insisted that I report this incident of being shot through the window to the police. But since the police were not present, I reported the incident to the governor, who issued me with the weapon-carrying license each time, but the matter simply passed without anything being done, just like the shot in Saarland into the windscreen of the car, which would have hit me if it had not ricocheted. The car was driven by Silvano at the time, and he also insisted that the incident be reported to the police, which is why we immediately drove to Pfucken and went to the police, showed the windscreen and explained everything. But we were only fobbed off ridiculously and sent away again. Not even a photo was taken of the windshield, which clearly showed what had happened. And the fact that we had even seen the shooter with the small caliber rifle was dismissed with the argument that we had been dreaming, and so on. But one person, the one who almost hit me in Hinwil, came to the center one day and apologized, saying that unfortunately he had been missiled by the sect but had now freed himself from it and realized that a belief in a god and so on was nothing more than lying and so on in order to maintain a money-making dependency.
This is known to me, as also our playerhands folks know. All For Your Life story has been broadcast several times planet-wide for information. However, as to the attempts to deprive you of life, I will say that by a providence all the attempts proved to be futile again and again, which is why the descendants then sought another way to harm you otherwise. When the last 3 of the first adversaries died of old age, and then also 2 of the descendants, so that today there are only 7 persons left, 2 of whom, however, are struggling with death because they are afflicted with the corona plague. The 3 of them, who have extraordinarily good knowledge and abilities concerning electronics, took out again the futuristic device that had been stored for a long time for them, which at that time the woman had received from the Omegas and with which various persons had been influenced, and made it functional in order to harm you. The Omegas could no longer be asked because they were deported, and so the descendants worked so persistently on the futuristic device until it became functional again and they found out how they could use it. Since then it has been used to do you such harm that you should get into trouble with the human beings, and in such a way that it is very difficult for you to prove that the incidents that occur are not of your making. This already started when you returned to Switzerland in 1969, and since then there have been repeated attempts to deprive you of your life, which even tried to do. It has happened 24 times so far, but every single attempt on your life failed as a result of inexplicable providence.
I guess that was the lucky thing, as we say, or the lucky nothing happened thing. What you said but mentioned about I know because it happened in the kitchen with a knife that was supposed to hit me in the back but was seen at the last moment by who was just able to snatch the knife from as she struck. She only told me years later what had happened at the time because I really had not noticed anything about the whole incident. This and 2 other incidents that were the work of are not counted in the 24 murders. But now I think that's enough palaver. So let's go now, you can talk while flying. This person who perpetrated this attack in Henwell on Billy as mentioned above in Contact Report 797 as follows. But one person, the one who almost hit me in Henwell, came to the centre one day and apologized, saying that unfortunately he had been misled by the sect but had now freed himself from it and realized that a belief in a God and so on was nothing more than lying and so on in order to maintain a money-making dependency. Was a fanatical Jehovah's Witness, as you can read in the 264 Contact Report. I thought it was just one. The second attack was carried out by a fanatical Jehovah's Witness who tried to shoot me in Henwell through my office window. Another time the Giza twerps were involved in an attack when lightning struck me out of the blue, and so on. Once Jacobus Bertschinger and the brothers Hans and Konrad Schutzbach were there when a bullet hit me on the armor plate in front of my chest. Once Silver No Lemon stood next to me as a bullet hit the ground next to my feet. And also Wendell Stevens was once there when a shot was fired and the bullet hit only a few centimeters next to my head in the wall, and so on.
Christianity/Vatican.
Which claims for itself the realization of Christian charity but has practiced the exact opposite. The historian Karl Distiner wrote in 1986, after intensive study of the history of Christianity, I know of no organization in the world in antiquity, the Middle Ages and modern times, including and especially the 20th century, which has been so long, so continuously and so hideously burdened with crimes as the Christian Church, especially the Roman Catholic Church. Murder of people of other faiths in their own country. Inquisition for centuries. About 1 million dead. Murder of those of other faiths in their own country and outside. Murder of Jews. Many millions dead. Murder of those of other faiths in other countries, especially Muslims. Crusades, many millions dead. Murder of native inhabitants of conquered countries, for example Indians, approximately 100 million dead, the largest genocide of all times. Murder of war opponents and their families. Countless wars inspired and blessed by the Church. Many millions dead. Murder of disabled people. Demanded, involved or tolerated, for example in the Third Reich. Thousands of deaths. Murder of opponents of regimes of dictatorships with direct church involvement. Argentina. Murder of ethnic groups within a state with direct church involvement. Serbs in Croatia in the 1940s or Tutsis in Rwanda in the 1990s. Murder of animals. Devaluation as soulless beings and release for slaughter. Billions and trillions of deaths. The same murderous inquisitor organization that still exists today.
506th Contact Sunday, 21st November 2010, 1:54 p.m.
In these organized machinations, which were also carried out in a warlike manner in the name of the Catholic Church, it has been recorded, according to our records, that around 9.8 million human beings were murdered in the last 2,000 years as a result of delusional belief. The number of unreported cases, which we of course only assume, is the same again. And as I have already said, the Inquisition organization of the Catholic Church came into being several centuries before the official Inquisition, that is to say long before 1231, when the Vatican instructed the dogs of the Lord respectively the Dominican monks as malicious inquisitors to carry out the witch hunt, which often only served to enrich the inquisitors as well as the Vatican, the rulers and priests, and so on. And this murderous Inquisition organization still exists today, although only its methods have changed, and the name of the criminal organization has been changed, and has been called Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith for about 45 years.
172nd Contact Sunday, 4th July 1982, 11:03 am.
Until we meet again. It is also enough for me today. Oh yes, wait, I have one more question. On the 18th of June, Robert Calvi, the head of Italy's largest private bank, was discovered in London hanging from a bridge. Did he commit suicide? Do you know anything about this?
I am oriented over it. The man did not commit suicide, but he was strangled, and this was in connection with a very intricate matter in which the Vatican and the secret services and also intelligence agencies played important roles. But about this, I want to tell you the following in confidence, which you must keep to yourself for the next 20 years.
The power of the Black Monks.
The murder of God's banker Roberto Calvi and the Vatican's capital dealings. A new examination of the body of the Italian bank boss Roberto Calvi leaves no doubt he was murdered in 1982. But who gave the order? On the morning of June 18, 1982, a hanged man dangled above the murky waters of the Thames River from the northern arch of London's Blackfriars Bridge. Bridge of the Black Monks. The final act set a final symbol in the life of the man who had apparently become so deeply entangled in the turmoil of capital and church that he no longer saw a way out. Roberto Calvi, called the Banker of God. As head of Banco Ambrosiano, Italy's largest private bank, he had caused the most massive banking crash in European history through criminal financial dealings for which he used his entanglement with the Vatican Bank. While the British authorities filed the case of the bankrupt, who had fled Italy, as a suicide, the Italian judiciary continued to investigate the motives of those circles, which would certainly have been severely damaged by Calvi's possible revelations, as well as the location of the body, which the corpulent 62-year-old would have had to develop artistic skills to reach, spoke against the suicide variant. Multiple exhumations and examinations of the body corroborated the murder thesis with circumstantial evidence, since, based on traces of material, the Thames Bridge could not have been the scene of the crime. In 1999, the mafiosi Flavio Carboni and Pippo Cole were sentenced to life imprisonment in Rome for the murder of Roberto Calvi. They allegedly lured the victim to London and guided the killers there. These days, the Italian judiciary put the apparently definitive line under the case. During a further examination of the banker's mortal remains, experts unequivocally determined that he could not have committed suicide, Italian newspapers reported. He had first been strangled and then hung from the scaffolding under the bridge. Case solved and all questions unanswered. Backgrounds and men of life and death of the Banker of God will probably remain a wide field of flourishing speculations. For example, for the British investigative author David Yallop, in the name of God, Calvi is one of the main suspects in the alleged murder of the 33-day Pope John Paul I in 1978. The motive for the crime: a possible replacement of the United States Cardinal Paul Marcinkus as head of the Istituto per le Opere di Religione Institute for Religious Works IOR, as the Vatican Bank, founded in 1942, is officially called. The go-getting Marcinkus tied up the papal financial enterprise in the 1970s by taking stakes in banks owned by the mafia-connected Sicilian tax lawyer Michel Sandone into the largest money laundering ring in Europe. Since the IOR published neither balance sheets nor accountability reports, but its select clients benefited from the tax exemption provided by Vatican status, this entanglement must have seemed like a true godsend to the honorable society. After Sandone's fraud was exposed in the mid-1970s and the IOR suffered losses of up to 50 million, Sandone's longtime friend Calvi advanced to become the closest confidant of Vatican Bank head Marcinkus. The central role that Banco Ambrosiano had already played in Sandone's empire, he was poisoned in prison in 1986, continued to determine Vatican monetary operations. Since Calvi had also built his transactions on this symbiosis, the panic in which he is said to have fallen after the death of Pope Paul VI, according to Yolop, would be quite explainable. He had trusted both Marcinkus, whose career began as a bodyguard of Paul VI, and Senden, his successor on the chair of Peter, Pope John Paul I. Albino Luciani, who passed away after 33 days in office, was considered a churchman who was suspicious of worldly events and whose urge for integrity seemed unworldly to many a curious. Due to his under whatever circumstances quick demise, the financial political constellations behind the Leonine walls remained untouched. And Karol Wojtyla, who had now been elected Pontifex Maximus, undoubtedly benefited from the money channels available to him as the nominal owner of the Vatican Bank for the realization of his political plans. The Archbishop of Krakow, who did not appear in any papal lottery before the conclave, was not only the first non-Italian election winner in 450 years, but also a citizen of a socialist state. After the new pope took office, the strategic Washington-Vatican axis, which aimed to overthrow real socialism, concentrated its activities on the pope's home country of Poland, where the Solidarność movement was ready to act as a fifth column from 1980. That the covert money transfers to Solidarność went through Calvi is as clear. To Yolop he suspects more than 100 million as it is to authors Herbert Blondiot and Audu Gumpel, who conclude in their book The Vatican Sanctifies the means. Calvi was deeply involved in all Italian political affairs, but through the Vatican Bank he was precisely also involved in supporting the anti-communist movements, not only in Poland but precisely there. The Vatican Bank supported Solidarność thanks to the mediation of Banco Ambrosiano. That the CIA took a lively part in the threading of these transactions is obvious, given the attention that United States intelligence paid to the Polish pontiff and his ambitions from the beginning. In the book The Black Empire, Carmen points out that as early as November 1978, the month after the election of the Pope, there is said to have been a first meeting between John Paul II and the head of the CIA residence in Rome. Later, the head of the church met once a week in Rome with CIA officials to discuss the situation. Back to Calvi, who was the de facto financier of the planned overthrow in the East. While he plundered the accounts of Banco Ambrosiano for the benefit of the papal coffers as the banker of God, his foolhardiness grew behind the curtain of curial reputation. Together with his helpers, who had the best contacts in curial circles as well as in organized crime, he set up an international network of banks that existed exclusively on the paper of his books. In 1981, Calvi got caught in the meshes of this network. For currency violations, Italy's most powerful banker to date was sentenced to 4 years in prison and fined 27 million. This was followed in May 1982 by the final collapse of Banco Ambrosiano under a debt burden of 1.5 billion. Calvi, who had appealed and was free on bail, saw his hopes of recovering money given to the Vatican dashed. Marcinkus, friend from fat days, had retreated to the Papal States, where he was inaccessible to Italian justice and remained IOR chief until 1989. He apparently saw the trip to London, which Calvi then took on June 16, 1982, as his last chance. According to the popular account, he wanted to sell his shares in the bank, which he had ruined with the help of people who were sympathetic to him, in order to plug the huge hole in the balance sheet. But the shares of Banco Ambrosiano had long since been suspended. Another version of the London trip is offered by the journalist and Vatican expert Welska von Rokus in her book Conspiracy Against the Pope. According to this version, Calvi cherished the hope that the Catholic fundamentalist organization Opus Dei would rescue him and thus the church state, which had been shaken by the banking crash, from its financial misery. Opus Dei, whose founder Josmare Escrivá Balaguer was canonized by the Pope last month, is considered John Paul II's house power and, along with the so-called Masonic, one of the wings of the Curia. Realizing the deal would have secured Opus control of the Vatican Bank, an option that did not go over well with the Freemasons, according to von Rokus. But even this alleged plan denied by Opus Dei did not come to fruition. Calvi's last trip apparently also caused unrest in intelligence circles at the time. Thus, the investigation files reveal that Flavio Carbone, who accompanied the banker in London and, together with Pippo Cole, arranged the murder by Mafia Headman, was in constant telephone contact there with Francesco Pazienza, considered a CIA agent who was in Washington. The Vatican's interest in Calvi's estate is shown by the fact that it bought the documents from Carbone through an intermediary Bishop Paul Hnilica, who has since been convicted of receiving stolen goods which Calvi had taken with him to London in a briefcase. Between $2 and $5 million are said to have changed hands in the process. Just a few weeks ago, a safe deposit box was discovered in Milan containing further documents that Calvi is said to have deposited there before fleeing to London. So far, nothing has become known about the contents of the papers. The purely criminal circumstances of the murder of the Banker of God may now have been clarified. The political background, however, is as murky as the floods of the Thames on the morning of June 18, 1982.
498th contact Saturday, 31st July 2010, 2:16 p.m.
Time and again, especially recently, I am asked about the Library of Alexandria, which was destroyed by a major fire and in which about 800,000 valuable scrolls with scientific records were burned. Many of the writings were snatched by the Vatican before the library was maliciously set on fire. What can you say about it?
As you know, Alexandria's library was the largest with the most handwritten records at that time. In fact, it housed around 800,000 very valuable scientific scrolls. The scientific handwritings, however, fell victim to an unprecedented wave of destruction during antiquity. Everything was destroyed in the 4th century by the delusion of the Christianity. This, when the aim was to destroy everything that did not fit into the Christian belief. These Christian belief delusion-based destructions took not only place regarding the Library of Alexandria in ancient Egypt, but also everywhere in Asia Minor, in the direct Roman Empire, and in Greece and so on, whereas all libraries were destroyed and burnt down. In Rome alone there were about 30 public bibliothecas and a very large number of private libraries and collections of writings which fell victim to Christian delusion. Which altogether was completely destroyed in wide sections of Rome, Asia Minor and Greece, and so forth, according to our annals, amounts to about 700 natural science scrolls. Many of these handwritten texts described very valuable medical cognitions and techniques, besides actual technical inventions, which, if these records and plans had been preserved, would have led to the human beings of Earth conquering the outer space and settling on other planets already more than 200 years ago. Furthermore, by the Christian destroyers 300 scrolls with political, literary and poetic written works were eliminated or stolen and incorporated into the new Christian church. All the works of antique academics and masters thus disappeared from public knowledge and fell into oblivion. Everything disappeared as if it had never existed, and just as if the earth humans no longer knew how to use their thoughts, no longer gained cognitions, and no longer made inventions. And all this only because the mighty of the new Christian church let destroy, burn and eliminate everything that could not be reconciled with their Christian belief delusion. Thus not only were all bibliothecas, collections and libraries of non-Christian culture radically made to disappear, but also all non-Christian temples, synagogues, houses of God, and houses of prayer were declared blasphemous and were just as completely destroyed as all the valuable old handwritings, with all the very important notes for the progress and the development of the earth humans. The scrolls were not only berated as godless and blasphemous, but it was also forbidden under severe punishments to read the recorded texts. Even the private homes were searched by the Christian henchmen, and if any scrolls were found during the search, they were burned publicly, and their owners held to account in an evil way. This also happened in the year 367 in Alexandria, when the local bishop Athanasius ordered such raids on houses, whereby bloody punishments were also carried out for non-Christian owners of writings, which partly also cost human lives. In the year 391 AD in Alexandria, even a deadly hunt against owners of non-Christian writings was brought into being, to which a larger number of human beings fell victim. In the year 490 the Emperor Constantine issued a decree by which mathematical scientists were also punished with the death of incineration if they did not themselves publicly burn their mathematical notes, and they did not renounce mathematics. Ultimately, only a few writings were preserved that were well hidden at the risk of the owner's lives. It was not until the 15th century that they were rediscovered, and it was not even 0.5% of what originally existed of what was destroyed by the Christian belief delusion and belief fanaticism. But also the remaining writings suffered a defeat, because the Christian fanatics were of course still concerned about destroying the ancient, important knowledge they regarded as contrary to the Christian belief delusion.
The mighty ones of the new Christian church feared the knowledge recorded in the scrolls like the plague and the devil, because they knew very well that their entire web of lies of their new religion would collapse like a house of cards as a result of the public disclosure of all the important notes. All the cognitions captured in the writings and so on were effective explosives for the elite of the new church, which would have blown up their entire web of lies.
Except from the book or out others uttered by Billy George Albert Meyer, unofficial translation.
There still exist the most diverse secret societies, which were very big secrets of the secret science, or at least believe to preserve these, which they want to preserve with all possible means of the force in their circles. On the other hand, many of these secret allies still live in the erroneous belief that their knowledge is as secret as it was centuries ago, and that their often erroneous teachings are real secrets of knowledge and power, although just as much of their knowledge is based on false doctrines as is the case with religions. But the real knowledge, the profound and very powerful, is completely foreign and unknown to most of the secret societies, so that they often indulge only in nonsense and false doctrines. The real secrets of the secret science are effectively very difficult to access and known only to a few initiated circles. And these secrets are so profound in knowledge that they are truly monstrous. The first is that the people of the world are the ones who are the most important, and the only ones who are the most important. So also false doctrines of psychiatry, religions and border and humanities, and so on, the writings which the Vatican has snatched under the nail, are considered today still as strictly forbidden knowledge, to which no normal outsider has ever access. This is a fact, still today in the third millennium. Still today, the immense knowledge of mankind, which was collected over very long periods of time, lies hidden in the inaccessible secret sciences, which are defended until the death of the Pope, the bigwigs and secret scientists, and are kept hidden from the broad mass of mankind.
Things to know. 724th Contact Friday, 11th October 2019, 9:49 p.m.
There was a man in America whose name was James Forrester, and so on. Answer. And as for the 10th question, there was a man in America named James Forrester who knew something about UFOs, but then he killed himself. But why, I do not know, so I want to know why. To this it is to be said that this man did not commit suicide, and I know this very well, for at that time the whole incident was observed by Bafath, for which he explained the whole circumstances to me and bound me to silence in such a way that I would never mention publicly the effective and true background and machinations of the far-reaching incidents, but only to that man who would then be the real one, who would take up my contacts with Euclideans and make them known worldwide, but then persistently keep silent about all the special things I would entrust to him. Now the fact is that on the one hand the name of the man was not James Forrester, but James Vincent Forrestal, the first Secretary of Defense of the United States of America, and he had such extensive knowledge in matters of UFOs and U.S. defense plans and intelligence operations, and so on, that a certain group and their forces, and so on, feared in it a great danger as regards the exposure of their devious machinations. This was because Forrestal did not agree with these machinations and was therefore a danger to the group, as a result of which it was decided to liquidate him, which was then done by murdering him at 1:47 a.m. on the morning of the 22nd of May 1949, first by strangling him to unconsciousness in the Bethesda Naval Hospital and then by throwing him out of a window on the 16th floor and consequently crushing him on the floor.
Article by Berk Gümüs.